Hello and welcome to Bedson and Coffey, Unfiltered,
where we will be discussing fitness, lifestyle, healthy eating habits, relationships, gas station performance pills, answering romantic queries. You have anything else, Tyler? Is there anything? Do you need help with anything right now? Because I feel like I'm in a position where I can help you with it.
I mean, and everything else that we come across as we go. But you know what it's going to be, right?
It's going to be unfiltered.
This was all I had the option to do. So.
Fortunately, though, you had the structure, you know what I mean? It wasn't like you were blocky and then you were like, wow, this is all I can do, but I can't be competitive.
I remember I got asked when he was competing all the time, they're like, why is he not doing classic or bodybuilding? And I had to explain him, like, he literally can't externally rotate. Like, we can't do a back double bicep. So
I was here. Like, I was staying internal rotation. I couldn't even get to neutral.
Yeah.
Now, like, I can.
You can actually do like a pull-up.
Two metal shoulders now. Yeah. I can do pull-ups again, yeah.
But they would always ask that. He's so big. Why is he not doing something else? We get that feedback too. And it was just like, they'd be like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's like, well,
I remember.
Yeah, we can't do
when
anything
came
else.
To us, I was like, man, you got a great look for classical. You're doing this.
Thank you very much. You were a big help to me through the whole time. I remember even the back shot was still kind of hard to get my shoulders just right, but we made the most of it.
Yeah. Got shredded.
Conditioning, I felt like I was always conditioned pretty well.
Yeah, that's my asset. I get pretty conditioned.
Did you compete back in the day, Jimmy?
I have never. I just had this discussion. We were in Pittsburgh, and they're like, when's the last time you competed? I'm like, dude, I've never competed, which is a rarity because we have a lot of guys, judges and expediters that you wouldn't think have competed.
Yeah.
Like you look at them and you're kind of like, this guy probably never. But almost all of them have. I mean, it's a rarity. And I mean, when you ask me how I got into it, I'll explain that more.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm one of the few people who haven't, at least in our zone, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how it is around the rest of the country, if you get out and get some guys that, haven't, but.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I feel differently. Like when you always hear people talking about coaches, if they haven't competed or if they don't look good. And I'm like,
There's some coaches I know that don't compete at all and they do pretty damn well.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
And trust me, some of the people that I know that are amazing bodybuilders would be the last people I would ever want on my judging panel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I've talked to people about that too. It's like, you've got Michael Jordan, you've got, Phil Jackson. And Phil was never the athlete Michael was, but Phil was 10 times the coach.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have people that can do and people that can teach.
Yeah.
And that's not always the same.
Right. I mean, you could go through every sport in history and start looking at guys who were phenomenal coaches. Your Rick Pitino's, your, like you said, Phil Jackson's. And, those guys weren't necessarily great players.
Sure.
I mean, it requires two different mindsets and two different abilities. Obviously, they both require knowledge, but I don't know that just because you've done it yourself necessarily means you're not able to help somebody else do it. You know what I mean? So
especially whenever you start looking at like professional sports and bodybuilding in general, that is so dominated by genetically superior individuals when you get into the upper levels. And it's like, well, that guy may have all the knowledge in the world and just simply does not have the genetic attributes to compete with those guys.
Yeah.
May have a great wealth of knowledge, but just simply doesn't have the body, to do so.
I've accepted that my role is coaching because I've experienced how good some of these people get.
Yeah.
And I love to do it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just like, my abilities to go as far as an athlete are not even close to what it is as a coach. No chance.
It's like body mechanics when I have people that come to meet with me. Like my understanding of body mechanics and lifting is where it is because I had to work around so much. It's like, dude, I had no range of motion. So for me to build anything resembling that of a competitive athlete, I had to really make the most of what I had.
Yeah, you had to figure it out for your personal structure and how you worked.
Yeah.
So we got a story from Jimmy to start because we haven't heard it yet. We saved it for this. So
I appreciate it.
Some people know Jimmy tore his triceps. So how did that happen?
So on March 22nd, Monica and I were out eating at a restaurant that I'll leave unnamed. Well, one of our favorite places. It's not a fast food restaurant. It's a nice sit down restaurant we go to quite often. And this particular restaurant for years has had geese that nest on their patio area. So we had went in and had lunch. We came out and it was drizzling. I'd parked my truck right up against the sidewalk in the front. So as we're walking around, Monica gets in the passenger side. I walk around the truck to get in the driver's side. And as soon as I turn the corner and look up, there's a big ass geese, literally 3 or 4 feet away, coming right at my face. He's not on the ground coming towards me. He's literally, it looked like a pterodactyl, coming at me. So obviously my instinct was to turn and run, right? Like the alpha male that I am. So I turned, and as soon as I turned, I tripped over the sidewalk, the curb where I came. And I went down, and of course I tried to catch myself with my hands. And as soon as my hands hit, they just collapsed under me. And I rolled over on my back, and as soon as I went to raise my arms up, they just fell. And I mean, I knew, for those of us who've been in this sport a while, like these are ruptured triceps. And I'm like laying on the floor in the rain, on the ground in front of the truck. And I'm like, oh, does Monica even know that like I fell? So eventually she comes out, she's like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, I'm hurt. And, she's like, I'm like, just get me, there was never a lot of pain, but I could not use my arms, obviously. And I was like, you're going to have to get me up off the ground. She's like, how am I going to get you up off the ground? You're 330 pounds. So here it is raining, and people outside that were inside have saw through the window, and they're coming out. And I'm like, yeah, not the most prideful part.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So long story short, they were ruptured. Both of them were ruptured. And I had the right arm repaired on May 7th. And the left arm is actually getting done tomorrow.
And when was the issue that?
March 22nd was when I fell.
Oh, okay.
And it was kind of so what happened was it was on a Friday. So I couldn't get in, obviously, to see ortho until Monday. Because, if you go to the emergency room, they don't do MRIs. They're not emergent. Yeah. So I had to wait. I actually did go to the emergency room just in case there happened to be an ortho on staff, but they sent me home. So I waited till Monday. I went in. They're like, oh, yeah, you've ruptured these. We got to have MRIs. So it took like a week for me to get in for an MRI. I was actually judging the Northern Kentucky. I mean, I was still functioning decently well. I just, couldn't like use my arms to get up or do a lot of stuff. But I mean, I could just still drive. And so I left judging the Northern to come home to get my MRI. And they called me like, yeah, our tech guy called in, so we're going to have to reschedule you. So they rescheduled me. It took another week to get in. I went to a different place. And when I got there, I couldn't fit through the tube for the MRI. So then they rescheduled a third time. So now, we're like a month out, and you're supposed to, these injuries should be surgically,
They're starting to scar and.
Well, the muscles atrophying and, so the best results, obviously, are the quicker you get in. Mm-hmm. So it was March 22nd was when it happened. And again, May the 7th was when I actually had it done. I actually went to Europe. We went to Europe for 2 weeks, went to Rome and Europe with 2 torn triceps, which was real fun trying to get in and out of airplane seats. But, and then, obviously I'm doing them at the same time because, you've got to have one good arm. And it's like 8 weeks post-op before they even let you do any rehab. Mm-hmm. So I'm literally just now getting into rehab on the right arm, which is like a towel on the wall, like just very basic stuff. So finally I was like, I need to go ahead and do this one. I had a couple weeks break in a show. And Monica's off for the next 2 shows, so she'll be with me. So to be a big help for me getting in and out of shows by myself. But I guess the rest of the year I'll be.
See, that wasn't the story I expected at all.
I mean, you see this very large, imposing man walk in. You're like, so how'd you tear your tricep tendons? Well, this is fucking goose.
Yeah.
And
so what happened to the goose?
Yeah, the goose are not to be seen anymore. They're not there. So I'm assuming this particular restaurant thought it was in their best interest to.
Make sure that doesn't happen again.
Remove them.
Imagine the cred that goose has among his peers right now, though.
The amount of text
30, you go there, he's from afar, just watching behind.
Yeah, the amount of text and stuff I get about geese now is just,
I'm not saying
so for those who didn't know, that's actually what happened. I would have much preferred that when Monica told the story initially that she let people think I was like benching 500 or something. But
yes, so it's his
that might have been less believable, I think. Though.
That's the thing, though. I always say this: the injuries that people get, like torn triceps, torn ACL, it's always from something non-related to lifting. It's always something like I was, moving a couch or a goose, or like I was out just taking a walk, and it's always something that's non-related to bodybuilding or training at all.
I don't know if you know Steve Spalding, but Steve turned pro. He's a guy in Columbus, got a gym, not super nice guy. Mm-hmm. I just saw, I think it's been maybe like, he might be close to 8-10 weeks now, but he tore his tricep getting out of the car.
Yeah.
He said he went to open the door and got tangled up in the seatbelt and wound up tearing his tricep. It wasn't a complete rupture, but it was a tricep tear. He had a surgery on it. I mean,
something so simple.
I think I never used to be a big believer in this until I started getting older, and that whole functional, training. I think there are very few bodybuilders that really have that. I just think it's not something that to be successful in bodybuilding, the guys pay a lot of attention to. And I think that's one reason why they wind up getting hurt doing everyday things. It's because I didn't have great mobility and flexibility, at any point in my life, but it sure didn't improve as I lifted weights and never paid attention to those specific things. So that's one thing I would encourage guys as you're putting on some size, do yourself a favor and try to stay on top of your mobility and flexibility, because it will bite you at some point when you least expect it.
Oh, absolutely. So today, guys, we have with us, we have Jimmy Hornback. Jimmy has actually judged both Tyler and myself
multiple times,
different shows throughout the past. And if you've competed in bodybuilding anywhere in the area, across the country, national shows, IFBB, chances are you've seen Jimmy and or been judged by him. So we're very thankful to have him on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. You guys have a cool thing going on here. I always have a cool vibe. I love seeing the reels and clips, and I would obviously do anything I can to help you guys. With your show.
You always have. I remember you helped me with posing years and years ago.
Same. Some of his pictures will pop up every now and then. I think my first year competing was 2015. I remember he judged me for that show, and I'm pretty sure majority of them afterwards.
Yeah, I did the Derby in 2015.
Yep.
I remember getting feedback from you and Monica.
Yep, that was some of the first feedback I got.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about what we do is being able to see guys and gals, evolve, whether it's on stage or off stage. And, for both of you, we had the opportunities to not only judge you, but work with you early on. And you guys have both went on and are doing amazing things in your personal, professional life, outside the stage in our industry. And I mean, that's always cool, to sit back and be able to do that, is to see people that are passionate, and want to do well. And be able to do that. And then I hate using the term giving back because it just sounds so cheesy, because I don't know what a better verbiage would be, but to be able to stay in our sport and help other people reach their goals. Yeah. And that's been a pleasure to be able to watch you guys both do that. So congratulations on what you guys have been able to do.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Pretty cool.
You've always been kind of the compass for me. Like anytime I see, I have a client at a show or anything, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I, in hindsight, it's like, okay, well, what do I need to look at here? What, just questions about structure, anything. Yep. Like, let me shoot Jimmy a text.
I do the same thing, man. That's just funny. I did it. I've done it multiple times. I'm like, what can I do here? And he's always honest with me, which I very much appreciate. But it's one thing I always tell people is I'm like, the only person you should listen to whenever you're looking for feedback about your physique is your coach and the judges. And that's it. You should never listen to anybody else. Yeah. So that's all I care about. Mm-hmm. So Jimmy has been around for how long have you been judging? How'd you get into it?
It's probably close to probably 20 years, I guess. Yeah. Maybe 15 to 20. And believe it or not, I'm one of the very few who never actually competed. Yeah. Most of the judges, I'm hard pressed to think of. I think of one or two. Very few that I come across in our sport, even when I'm traveling, have not competed. Mm-hmm. And I grew up a bodybuilding fan. Obviously this was days before the internet and all that stuff. And the only thing you had was magazines. And it was just something I was enamored with. I thought it was, just amazing. And I was a huge Porter Cottrell fan. And as it happened, obviously for those who don't know, Porter's and I both live in Louisville. One of my buddies that I graduated from high school with played basketball all as we were growing up. He got on the fire department out of high school, and he just so happened to out of the academy, his first station was at Quint 10 in Louisville, which is where Porter was. So he and Porter became very good friends, which obviously opened the door for me to become friends with Porter. And Porter and I have been friends for, close to 30 years, I guess. And Porter was kind of at the end of his competitive career. And, we were always talking bodybuilding. And Porter just thought that I had potential to be a really good judge, potential to, judging's kind of different. It's a hard thing to teach people. You know what I mean? Like you either have an eye or you don't. And the criteria can be in front of you and the parameters can be in front of you. But it is a hard thing to teach. And Porter thought that I had that ability to do that. So he reached out to Roger and Sandy Riedinger, who were our state chair and co-chair at that time, and said, hey, I think this guy would be, a good asset to your team. They brought me right in. I test judged and obviously did well, and has been a judge since. I was probably a table judge for 10 years. Probably been head judging for 10 years. I'm a national judge now, a pro judge. I have the fortune that the IFBB and the NPC trust me, and I get to do a lot of traveling. 20 to 30 shows a year. Go around the country and see and do a lot of really cool things with a lot of really cool people. So my path was a little bit different, I think, than most people's in the way that it works. But ultimately, there's still the same hurdles you have to go over, once you get there.
Yeah. So when it comes to judging, how does that process work? Do they so you said you had to go in there and be a test judge. Yep. Give us a little insight on if somebody wanted to become a judge today.
Right.
How do you go about that?
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to get to become a judge, obviously they would reach out to me if you're in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia. I handle the rosters for all those states. And just tell me you want to test judge. And we'll have a phone call first. We'll go over some stuff. The immediate kind of disqualifications are you can't be a prep coach. You can't be coaching people. Obviously, we don't want anything that lends the ability to look shady or to look improper. So we don't allow guys who prep coach to judge. Obviously, we have people that do everyday just lifestyle clients and stuff, and that's fine. Once we get past that, we'll set you up for test judging. You have to test judge 3 times, has to be within a year, and your scores have to be within 80% of the actual scores. So what happens is you sit behind us or at the end of the table, you kind of do it on your own. You score the show as if, you were a table judge. The only difference is we don't use your scores. Then at the end of the when we come back for the night show, I have a head judge report that's printed out that gives me all the scores, and I compare the test judge's scores to that. And, if you're within 80%, you can pass 3, do that 3 times. We consider you credentialed, and it kind of put you on the books to be able to do shows. Yeah. And, there's some other things. It kind of depends on where you're at, where you're located in the state, because when I do the rosters, obviously I try to use the judges that are closest to an event. Yeah. Just for expense reasons for promoters. But we use people from all over. I've got somebody from way up in Indiana. Actually, I'm going to wind up probably having 2 people from Indiana coming in to do our state show in a couple weeks. So we'll use people from all over. But that's how it works. It's not really a complicated process. I think what a lot of people find is it's kind of unforgiving and, I think people think there's some type of glory or prestige that being able to sit down at the table. And a lot of people, I think, find out after they test judge once that that's really not the way it is. And, expediting is kind of the same way. If you want to expedite, we bring you in, hook you up, get you expediting. There's lots of good opportunities in expediting. I mean, we've brought in people to expedite a year and wind up getting on the Olympia team and going to the, Olympia. Yeah. Lot more opportunities on the expediting side. But yeah, if any of you guys want to test, and obviously we have to need judges. I mean, I don't just let people test judge if we've got a panel full of judges, because I don't want to have 4 judges that aren't judging in a year. I mean, because then you've got to go through the process again. So if you're ever interested in that, just reach out to me. If you meet those criteria, we'll have a talk. And if it's something that works out, if we're in a position where we need people, we'll get you set up and see if you can get past those 3 test judges. And I mean, a lot of it, you've kind of either got it or you don't, especially the first show. But it's not the same at test judging a show with 60 bodies in it as it is test judging a show that has 150 bodies in it. It becomes much more difficult.
One of mine and Laura's favorite things to do is sit at the shows, pre-judging, and see if we get it all right. We really enjoy that. Laura's especially good at it. Yeah. She'll sit there and almost 95% of the time she's got everybody top 5 exactly right. As they come out on stage, she's like, that one. Yeah. And I'm like, pretty impressive. So we try to test ourselves and just for fun, just to see if we know the criteria. Yeah. So that's always something I think people should try to do as a coach as well, is see if you can pick what they want. Yeah. Because it's just as important for us to know what you guys are looking for whenever we're going to a show and we're bringing athletes there. Because if we don't hit that mark or know the criteria, then we're doing
right.
We're not doing the right service.
In more than just the class that you yourself compete in.
Exactly.
Or you prefer. So because you're judging every class.
Yeah.
So if you just do men's physique, just watching that was not going to do you a whole lot of good. You need to know every class. So watching each of them.
That's why, like we talked about, I message Jimmy a lot of the time after I have an athlete compete or even sometimes before. And I'm like, what do you think about this? Just as like just an opinion. And he'll always tell me straight up, like, needs to be leaner, needs to be this. And I'm like, thank you. At least I have like the direction to go to.
Sure.
And so
the tricky thing about that is, and I saw this a whole lot this past weekend after, Teen Collegiate Masters Nationals. And of course, we see it every show, but after a show, you'll see people that will say on social media, well, the judges went for a harder look this time, or the judges went for a leaner look this time. The look that we want is always the same. The parameters for the divisions do not change. Those parameters are always the same, and the look we want is always the same. But what happens sometimes is a class comes out, and there's nobody in that class that very closely fits the parameter, right? So then we have to judge what's in front of us. And sometimes, like in bikini, for example, we wind up with a girl who's a little harder than we would like because while she's not in the parameter, she's closest to the parameter. Or in bodybuilding, you may have a guy who's, not as conditioned as we would want, but he's still closest to the parameter, among what's on stage. And that is really indicative of making sure that you pick the right division to be in.
Yeah.
You cannot be successful if you're competing in bikini and you should be in figure, or you should be in wellness. I mean, you have to be able to identify, whether it's you or your coach, which division you've got to be in. I mean, it happens a lot. Like somebody will come out and we're like, oh, this guy should have done classic, or this guy should have just stayed in men's physique. And, at the regional level, it's obviously pretty common. We'll have guys and girls do multiple divisions.
Which I think that's fine. I always encourage them to do that. I'm like, because some want to do a certain division. I'm like, well, I think you should do this too.
Yeah.
Just to see what the judges say.
Right.
Because I kind of know where they should go. But some people have this desire where they really want to do a certain division.
Right.
And they need to kind of hear it from somebody and be like, oh, okay. Like
The only issue I have with that is sometimes people can do very well in a division that they're really not meant for, just based on who shows up that day.
Yeah, that's true.
You can catch a kind of a weak class in, men's physique and do well when, in reality, like you're too big for men's physique, but I mean, that stuff will all get sorted out. You know what I mean? Like it'll eventually, the rubber will meet the road and you'll figure it out on your own. Or if you're working with a coach, they'll figure out where you need to be. Even if you happen to be successful in a class that you shouldn't be in for a while, it all sorts itself out. Trust me.
And you had said something there just a second ago that I wanted to touch on. I've had this conversation with my clients, and I'll credit you for beating this into my head. But you was talking about, someone may be leaner than maybe you'd want in a particular class or whatever else. And I think a lot of times people will get things a little bit confused as to what exactly matters most. And they'll say, well, this guy looked leaner. I don't know why he didn't place better. And I remember from day one, you've always told me that structure is the first thing judged on. Structure, that silhouette is the first thing that is looked at. Would you mind touching on that, Jim?
Sure. If you've ever came to any of our clinics, you've heard me say this and probably could repeat it verbatim. But again, it is something we try to pound into people's heads because I think you need to understand that to be successful. So I call it, you remember the little yellow books we used to get, the Idiot's Guide or the Dummy's Guide to whatever. I call it the Idiot's Guide or the Dummy's Guide to posing. So, or judging even for that matter. So if you imagine that there's a sheet that's hanging between you and us on stage, and all we can see is that silhouette that you create, that is by far the first thing that we look at and the most important, right? In bodybuilding, we want to see huge shoulders, big taper, small waist, big quad sweep. Same thing for classic. We start moving down into like figure. Obviously, for figure we want bigger shoulders and a more taper than we do like in bikini, right? So it's just an evolution from as you move up the ladder into the divisions. But we judge on three things: symmetry, muscularity, and condition. That silhouette that you create is your symmetry, your balance, your flow, your structure, whatever you choose to call it. That's the first thing they're going to bring our eyes to you. and it's the most important. Obviously, the amount of muscle you carry and how lean you are relative to the division you're in, and they're pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But you can definitely have guys that are bigger or more or leaner than another guy, but not do as well in certain women's divisions also, if the other person is better structurally. Now, this is where I think people drop the ball on posing. So like when you hear us preaching posing, this is one of the big reasons why posing is so important, is because if you don't pose or present well, that silhouette that we just talked about and how important it was is not going to look well, right?
Absolutely.
When you turn around to the back, when guys or girls, which is the most common mistake, right, in the divisions, is they pinch their back. What does that silhouette look like from the back? It looks terrible, right? So I try to tell people, whether you're posing at home, in the gym, in the mirror, always look at that silhouette you create and be like, what's going on here? I've got nice shoulders. I've got a nice taper. If you don't have a nice taper, is it because you have a wide waist? Or is it because, like you're not opening your back up correctly? There are some things that you can fix with posing that will improve you immediately, right? And then some things are structural, and you're going to have to figure out a way. If you got a wide waist, maybe, make your shoulders bigger, make your quad sweep big, adjust things in your training to offset the width of your waist, because obviously a wide waist isn't an asset to anybody in any division. But that silhouette will always be the most important. And you're going to be in that front pose the longest of any pose you're in. The more competitive your class is, the longer we're going to hold you in that front pose. And, again, if you don't have a great silhouette in that front pose, that's hard to overcome right out of the gate. So, make sure you're able to hit your poses and present them in a manner that always makes your silhouette look as the best that you can for your body.
And that may look different for each competitor, right? Like, knowing how to pose to showcase your strengths. Like for myself, I didn't have the smallest waist, so hitting a little bit of an angle with my hips when I'd pose for physique or anything to create that look ahead of that greater taper even, and so on. Just and that being the case for whomever.
Yeah.
So in men's physique is a unique division because like in men's bodybuilding and classic, right? You address us straight on,
Sure.
Right? Now they're in classic, those guys may try to put a little, but in your front pose and stuff, you're straight on. In men's physique, you don't have to be straight on. You can turn. So what happens a lot in men's physique is guys will literally turn so much that they're almost perpendicular to the judges table, right? I mean, they're almost standing sideways and they're not opened up enough. So from where we're setting, you look like an exclamation point on stage, right?
Yeah.
You have to be opened up enough so that we can see that silhouette you've created.
Sure.
And so you got to work that happy mixture of making my waist look as small as I can, but making sure they can see, the silhouette, my lats opened. And you've got to kind of adjust that where you are at the table, I get a good perspective on that because I'm used to sitting in the middle of the table head judging shows all year long. And then, when I go to a pro show or a national show, I'm not head judging that. So sometimes I'm further out, or oftentimes I'm further out on the table. And I can tell you, it looks a lot different sitting 3 seats over from the middle than it does in the middle. So you've got to have some perspective on that as a competitor. And this is really in the men's, especially in men's physique, really, that when you hit those poses, you've got to be able to allow yourself to be seen by that entire table of judges. They're all scoring you. As a matter of fact, a lot of people may not realize this, but the way the panels are usually set up is we use either 5 or 7 judges. Your high score and your low score are thrown out, so they're not used. And generally, the head judge does not score. If I'm only using 5 judges, the head judge scores. But in a lot of shows, I'll use 5 plus 1. So I've got 5 judges plus the head judge. And in that case, the head judge doesn't even score. He's just kind of running the show. He's moving people around. So he may not even have a score. So if you're addressing everything you have straight onto the center table and you're ignoring the fact that the people on the ends of the table can't see you, that might not be the best for you because those are the people who are actually scoring you. Now, most of the time, when I set the roster for show, obviously I'd like to score. I don't want to just sit there. So I set it up for me to score. But depending on where you're judging, what show or what state, you may be in a situation where, the head judge isn't scoring. So again, things to keep in mind to understand when you're working on your posing and you're presenting, how important those things are.
That's great
Absolutely.
to know because I always tell, especially at national level shows, say like I had a guy win his pro card in men's physique, and we always went over, I'm like, if you're going to be the tallest guy out there, so when you go out for overall, you're going to be on the far right side.
Right.
I was like, I need to make sure you angle in a little bit, or else they're not going to be able to all see you.
Right.
So that's something I try to instill in everybody's head. I'm like, you got to make sure that you are aware you're at on stage so you can be seen your best.
Right. If you're on either ends of the stage, it is in your best interest to angle in slightly. And I mean, we're not going to, it's not appropriate for the head judge to tell you to do that, right? I mean, we don't give anybody anything that would be considered an advantage. So I'm not going to be like, hey, 21, I can't really see you. Can you turn in? You've got to know that and be able to understand that you need to angle in so the panel can see you. Yeah. Because if you're at the end, trust me, from the head judge over, they're already going to struggle to see you in best case scenario. So there are lots of things. And, I was listening to one of your guys, clips recently, and, you'd mentioned that, there's no reason to not pose well. There's a lot of posing coaches. Oh, yeah. The first thing I want to make sure people understand is there's a difference between hiring somebody that's going to choreograph you a show for the night show and all that, and it can be phenomenal at that. Then somebody can just put you through your quarter turns and your mandatories. Yeah. The night show, that routine's not judged, so it doesn't matter if you just come out and hit 2 poses and walk off. That's your time on stage to do with what you want and to present your physique in its best light. So we encourage you to take that time and use it. But if you bumble it, or you don't even put any time into it, it's not going to hurt you. Yeah. As opposed to, like, if you bumble your mandatories, it's going to have an immediate impact. Yeah. And the thing about prep coaching is there's a day of reckoning, right? When you prep somebody for a show, they're going to be on stage at some point, and no matter what you told them, we're going to see if that's true or not. So you can only bluff a competitor for so long. Oh, you look great. You look great. Well, like I said, it's not like you're getting ready for a wedding and you just want to lose 10, 20 pounds. You might look better. Posing's a little bit different because posing is very black and white. You know what I mean? And it's like there are a lot of guys that want to prep or do posing instruction because you can really never be wrong. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to be like, well, it was wrong, unless it's just atrocious, as opposed to getting somebody in shape. You're either in shape or you're not. There's no kind of debating that. And again, I think that draws a lot of people into wanting to, posing coach, because it's kind of like, there's less, I think, repercussions if they don't pose well. Yeah. Now granted, listen, but there are tremendous in our area, especially, and just to be fair to everybody, I'm not going to, name people, but we do in our area have a tremendous amount of talent, both on the men's and women's side, for people who that I think are in a good position to do that. And I mean, if you're a prep coach and that's not your thing, just send them to somebody who is, what I mean? We do at least 2 free posing clinics a year for those who are listening to this who have never aware of that. They're completely free. We break them up per division. You guys have,
always there.
Yeah, I mean, you guys come. We appreciate you always bringing your clients. And we choose to bring in the same crew pretty much every year because it's people that I can trust, that not only can pose well, but I can trust them to work with people and send them out that they'll be better when they come in. Just because somebody's a competitor or looks good or poses well themselves doesn't mean that they can necessarily have that ability to share that with other people. But any posing clinics you can go to like that, where they're ran by somebody that's affiliated with the NPC or a promoter, they're usually going to be pretty good to go. I mean, they're going to have some good assets there. And there are also a lot of great people in our area that obviously that charge. Most people do. We don't charge because anything affiliated with the company or the brand, or our show, it's not really appropriate. But there are lots of people who are really good that do charge, and it's worth the money because trust me, you can spend 16, 20 weeks dieting, suffering on the treadmill, missing out on a whole lot of extracurricular fun with your friends and drinking and eating, and then get on stage and have the best physique and not do well. I cannot stress that enough. The best physique does not always win. Mm-hmm. You would be surprised how often the best physique does not win.
And I've seen that. You'll see what you have takes a backseat to what you can show. And I've seen people present better than somebody who maybe has a better physique than them, but You know, just because you had the better
Yeah.
physique, you didn't display it as well as this guy did,
Right.
and he beat you.
I literally tell people, I'm like, do not let yourself lose because you didn't practice posing.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you can do is do all that work, like you said, and then you go on stage and you don't display yourself properly, and
Yeah.
you lose to somebody who is not better than you because you couldn't show it correctly.
Right.
I'll tell
and
a
I
lot-
mean, our job's not to like pick a winner based on this guy could be really good.
No.
So like, and here's what
Right.
happens for us a lot. And, this, and again, men's physique is a division that happens in a lot. It happens in figure a lot too. What I will try to do is when we turn them to the back, if somebody who's like in first, second, or third, if they're really good and they're already kind of in a position to be, you know, that top three, if they botch their back pose, you know, and you're like, oh, botch it enough to where like, I've got to move you out of there, right? Because one of the two poses that you have, you completely
I see that often
missed.
too.
I'll turn them around, and then I'll give him one more shot. I'll turn him back to the back again to be like, are they too? Does he feel like he doesn't have enough room, or guys too close? I just want to make sure that there's nothing on our end that we're doing to keep people from being able to hit that pose. Because, you know, sometimes guys are real close on stage. I'll move them if obviously you need room. But sometimes, you know, guys feel like they're crunched and they have a little bit more room and don't. And we turn them around the second time, and if you hit it, okay, we're good. You know, that's kind of how we had you placed anyway. But if you don't, you got to come out. You know what I mean? Like, I can tell that you've got an amazing back, but you've got to be able to show it. You know what I mean? Like, it's you have to be able to present that physique on stage.
That's a show I was watching, the live stream in Miami. I had a competitor there, and there was a guy in his class. My guy ended up getting second, but there was a dude that was in the second place position, and they turned him to the back twice, and both times he was pinching his back, so they moved my guy in, and I was like,
there's so many
it's
reasons.
something so simple like that,
Yeah.
you know, like
There's so many reasons
Yeah.
guys screw that back. And figure does it all the time too. There's so many reasons. And I think the easiest way to understand that is when you pinch your back together, that's what feels like you're flexing your back, right? So when you squeeze it together in your mind, I'm sure it feels like I'm flexing my back, right? And hopefully now that people have that idea in their head, I'm trying to be as wide as I can from the back. I don't want to do anything that creates any less width than I already have. Will help them understand, like, do not pinch, you know, like it's a completely different feeling when you turn to the back. But I do understand what happens. I mean, there's a lot of things, like I said, sometimes people are too close. Sometimes people just don't know and they feel like that feels like flexing. Cause I mean, some people go to it immediately. Like it's like, that's their pose. And it's like, obviously they're not aware that they're making themselves look worse than they are.
No.
But yeah, guys, get your posing and presentation down, and you'll leave shows a lot happier. You'll never leave somewhere. Because trust me, the last thing I want when I get a feedback request is to tell somebody,
picture posing.
yeah, if you could only pose, you know. But every show we're setting at, and it doesn't matter who I'm there with, if I'm there with Gary or Bill or whoever, they'll be like, oh, you know, if only this guy could pose, or if only this girl could pose. And I'm like,
Yeah.
every show.
I see
every
it,
show.
watching them all the time. I got a loaded question for you. This one I'm excited for. Let me pull up my phone for this one. So over the years, this is something I've always looked at, is how much bodybuilding, the looks have evolved, I would say, from, you know, even 5 years ago, 3 years ago, especially 10 years ago. And I'm sure you've experienced it because you've been judging for so long. How do you feel that happens? Like, I guess it's a loaded question. Like, do you guys meet every year to discuss what the new look's going to be, or how do you guys establish that? Because you look at something like Nicole Wilkins when she won her last Olympia, to our current Olympia champion for figure, Sid Gillen, or how Ashley Kaltwasser looked, you know, 10 years ago to how she looks like now.
Right.
But like, there's a picture that we want to show you, and that is for figure division. Do you feel like it's obviously a lot more conditioned now? Do you feel like they're trying to go in that direction still, or we're trying to tone that back? Or
okay, so let me
what are your
back up
thoughts?
just a second.
Yeah.
Yes, we do meet every year.
Okay.
We go over lots of things, but really the criteria very rarely changes. We have had moments in the past where we've been like, we want women's physique to come down, you know.
Yeah.
But generally the criteria stays the same. And how that happens, what happens is, just like any other sport, right? It evolves. I mean, just like, you know, people compare now, is LeBron's era tougher than, you know, Jordan? Was it tougher? You know, sports evolve. People want to do, you know, want to do better. So what happens is, you know, over time, right?
Yeah.
You have a figure girl as a whole they become more muscular.
Yep.
And they become leaner because it's like a girl shows up and gets third. And it's like, what do I have? I don't want to be third. I want to be first. So she gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
She gets leaner, right? And those are things you can do to separate yourself from the rest of the class. So it's like they're just natural progressions in the divisions. And very often we hear after shows, or I see on social media where it's like, this is the judge's fault. This is the reason it's out of control is the judges should be punishing these people. And that sounds like a very easy resolution.
Easy out. Yeah.
But the problem is what happens is we don't go away in 2024 and come back in 2025. And all of a sudden we have one girl who is light years ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
And if that was the case, it would be easy. It'd be like, you're outside the parameters for this division. We would push them down in scores to an appropriate spot. What happens is you come back in 2025 and half the lineup is improved, right? So you've got basically, everybody has gotten better to some degree. So it becomes very difficult to toe the line of we don't want people getting bigger or better in a division because not just one or two people come back bigger and better, right? Mm-hmm. They all do because they all have the same goal, and that's to do better than they did. Yeah. Or if they're already doing well, it's to continue to stay on top. So, just the natural progression does that to a division, and it's a hard thing for us to monitor and definitely to implement. Like if you go to NPC News online and read the parameters for the division, they're kind of vague, and that's because, like I said earlier, sometimes we show up and nobody fits the criteria, right? There's so many things, moving parts at a show. And the men's side, for the most part, that like Classic's not going to get out of control because they have a weight cap, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to stay the same. Bodybuilding will always continue to be, there will be peak guys who show up that are just, outside the parameter for what we think is normal. Like, oh my God, like this, did you see the changes this guy made? And figure, for the most part, in women's physique are two that I think for the most part become the issues because you don't always have people that are appropriate for those classes anyway, right? Especially at a regional level show and sometimes at a national level show. But we had a lot of people that do a division that just aren't appropriate for the division. So then when you show up against people who are appropriate for the division, it makes that person look even, further.
An outlier.
Yeah. So that chick is way too big, but it's because she's on stage. And this is a very tough thing at a regional level. And we don't always get it right, but we try really hard to remind ourselves of this during the show. Sometimes we have a class and we're like, this guy's too big for men's physique. He's just too big. Mm-hmm. Or this girl's too big for figure. She should be doing women's physique, right? But then we have to make sure that we take into account what does the rest of the class look like? Because regional level shows are so eclectic that, you may have nobody else in that class that's really appropriate. They're all on the small side, and it makes the person look even bigger. Yeah. And they're not really outside the parameter of the class. They just look like it.
Because of who else showed up.
Right. So it's our job to kind of to manage that. But I don't know that'll ever change. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's some limits to, I think, human nature, how big people are going to get.
Sure.
But I think we will always continue to see each division evolve and get better, just because I think that's just as it is with any sport.
Comparison you made too with like LeBron James era and everything like that, it makes a lot of sense because, as the years go on, we find out better ways to do this, better ways to train, better ways to eat.
You would think right, that what could you possibly find out today about nutrition that would make you better than 2 years ago? Sure. And there are always breakthroughs, whether it's in supplementation or some level of nutrition or, something we find out about, cardio fasted versus, all these little things that we use are so much different. Like you can go back, just like you said, for those who did, it was Nicole Wilkins and Sid Gillian. Sid's not somebody who's ever been too big, but she's a prime example of she could come in 5% less condition and still that silhouette is amazing. Yeah. Right. Nice shoulders, without being overly capped and nice waist. And just a beautiful, she's the girl that when she comes out, you're like, that girl,
So you've been a coach for many, many years, and now you actually have your own show in Louisville, the Kentucky Cup. Would you like to tell everyone a little bit more about that, and then also the shows that are coming up that you'd
Yeah, so Monica and I have been promoting the Kentucky Cup. This was our second year. We've been doing this for a long time, and really, to be honest with you, never really had a desire to promote. It's a lot of work, and if you want a show to do well, it takes a lot of your time.
Absolutely.
The opportunity came our way, and it became, like, we're going to do this, and it's been a lot more fun, and it's been a lot more rewarding to us than I thought it would be. So what we've got the rest of this year, we've got our state show. Actually, in 2 weeks, we've got the Indy premiere in Muncie, Indiana, which is a phenomenal show. I'll be there for that. Then we've got 2 weeks after that, our state show promoted by Gene and Tina good friends of mine.
Yeah, that'll be in Somerset, actually, where my gym's at. So
Nice.
Yeah.
looking forward to that.
That's right. So new venue this year, new place, lots of excitement surrounding that. From what it looks like on social media, I think he'll have a great turnout as always. Couldn't ask for a show put on and ran by two better people than Gene and Tina. Then we will have Mr. Bill Sibilia, IFBB Pro Head Judge, has the Kentucky Bourbon Classic in September 23rd.
28th.
Okay, 28th. That's in Louisville at Louisville Memorial Auditorium. It's always a great show. This is will be Bill's second year promoting that as well, co-promoted with Gary Udit. And then we'll finish up in Covington, Kentucky with Jeff Angus Sherman, co-promoted with Gary Udit at the Natural Kentucky in November the 2nd or 9th. I'm sorry, I didn't have these off the top of my head.
No.
I have a whole lot of shows the rest of this year, so the one's a couple weeks. But our show, we're gonna. I wanted to kind of give these guys an exclusive since we're here today. We're gonna do a couple things a little bit different for 2025 based on our responses and our feedback from 2024. And one of the things that we're going to do is, for those who don't know, and I don't know how good of a job we did promoting that this year, is we brought back the Mr. and Miss Louisville divisions. The best we can tell was those were stopped being held in the 80s, the Mr. and Miss Louisville. So we decided to bring that back, and it's one class per division for every division. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if you're in bodybuilding and you wanted to do Mr. Louisville, there's one class. It doesn't matter if you're a bantamweight or a super heavyweight, it's one class. And you're judged on stage. Same for every other class in the female division, it's one class. And we pick, Bill will be our head judge, Mr. Bill Sabia, again, IFBB Pro head judge. That team will pick a winner, and you will be Mr. or Miss Louisville. Which is pretty cool because, it's kind of it used to be a pretty prestigious thing to be the Mr. and Miss Louisville, and it went away for a long time, and we wanted to kind of bring that excitement back. So we did some pretty cool awards for that this year, which went over really well. We do customized Louisville Slugger bats. Obviously, for those of you who may not be in Louisville and don't realize it, Louisville Sluggers are made in Louisville. So we did customized bats and customized baseball jerseys that had on the front, it was like, Miss Louisville, and on the back, it was your division. So if you were Miss Louisville figure, on the back, it said figure.
And what are the requirements for that? Like I know with some of the others, do they have to be a resident of Louisville? Or
So the way we did it this year was it was open to 6 counties. Jefferson, Bullitt, Odom on the Kentucky side of the river, and Clark, Floyd, and Harrison on the Indiana side of the river. And the reason that we did it that way is because for those who of you are around the Louisville area will understand that that's kind of what we consider Metro Louisville.
Sure.
So if you're watching the news or they ever refer to Metro Louisville, those are the counties that encompass that. We had a lot of interest in doing those, especially once people saw the awards that were not in one of those counties. So I think what we're going to do for 2025 is we're going to open that up. We're going to open the Mr. and Miss Louisville divisions up to probably the host state. We still need to have another conversation with Gary about this, how exactly we're going to do it. So like if you live in Nelson County or, what county? What is
versus Fayette County?
Fayette County. Like you would still be able to do it. And it's pretty cool because, like I said, we're still going to do the bats, the customized bats, and the customized jerseys. The years obviously will change on them, and the colors will change every year. So that's going to be pretty cool. Hopefully that will go over very well. But anybody will be eligible for those. I think if you're a Kentucky resident, it's probably how it's going to wind up. Just follow us on our social media, and we'll nail that down a little bit more. And then the second thing we're going to do is kind of a way to give back to those people who have sponsored us in the last couple of years. Both of you guys were gracious and sponsored us at the 2024 event. At the Louisville Memorial Auditorium has like a huge like ballroom underneath the main floor, which we've never used because I didn't want to have to police the room being used during the show. So what we're going to do for 2025 is we're going to open that up for our vendors and our sponsors. We'll have some level of, goodies in there, some type of catering in there for you guys to go and hang out, a place to take your competitors so that you don't have to be standing in the hall backstage if you want to talk about things, or just a place to go sit and relax that will only be accessible, for those people who are sponsors of our event. And again, it's at no cost other than, for the people who are sponsoring it, but it's just a way of us to kind of be able to give something to people and be like, hey, thank you. Yeah. We need you guys for these shows to work. I mean, sponsors are needed and necessary. And we want to develop long-term relationships with people. And, that's one of the few things that we're able to do. It's hard to come up with a way to thank those people, right? Other than, displaying your logos and stuff, which is kind of the reason people sponsor, right? Yeah. So we want to be able to do something beyond that. And we're going to do that. So that'll be pretty cool. We'll release more details about that as we get closer as well. So we're already starting to put together the colors and the bats, and we're going to probably put some options out there and let people vote on what colors they would like to have for 2025. But again, we got a lot of really cool feedback on that. And if it doesn't go well this year with open it up, we'll just, cut the counties back next year. Yeah. But it's hard to tell people who really want to have an opportunity to win one of those no, because you live, like I live in Bullitt County, I mean, a lot of people outside where we're at still work or exist or have some, some part in Louisville. So I think we're just going to open it up and see how that goes and give everybody an opportunity to do it. And if the numbers wind up being good, we'll wind up expanding those classes. Like we wind up having 15 to 20 guys in bodybuilding. We'll do like we'll split them into 2 classes and then we'll have an overall or something for that. The reason we obviously only had 1 class this year is because when you're limited so much demographically, you're not going to have 20 people in a division. Sure. So that was how that came about. So 2 pretty cool things that we wanted to share with you guys today. So hopefully you guys will want to come be a part of that in 2025.
You heard it here first.
Exclusive.
That's right. Before we wrap up, Tyler had made and I know you've talked about this. You seem excited. I know you do. And we talk, off this. He sends me texts. He's like, man, do you think? I'm like, well, I hope, fingers crossed for you. But you being on here would be a great way to give us some insight. He had mentioned not being able to work out as much lately because of his schedule. Both my shoulders. Is there a chance that men's wellness would be coming to Kentucky? Because Tyler has his heart set on it. I think he'd do well.
He's probably the poster child for wellness. If we're looking
That's exactly what I said.
If we're looking at the shape and the structure and what we need. But those decisions are made further up the food chain than me. But I can tell you, I'll do all I can to politic for
I'm only training glutes right now.
That's it. That's all you're training. Stick with that path, though.
I won't let you down.
You never have.
Are we required to wear heels or not?
We could probably come up with an alternative type of
platform
shoe for you guys. I think. You know what I mean?
What if we did like the untied like Timberlands, like in the 80s?
Oh
man,
that would be There is like men's stripper shoes are probably an untapped corner of the market. Like no one says.
Right. I know somebody's going to corner that market if they make men's wellness.
There you go.
Get your untied Timberland wellness shoes.
Yeah. Every bodybuilding magazine in the early 90s was just like cut off jean shorts and untied Timberlands.
Yes.
So,
bring it back.
Yeah. Bring it back. It never left at my house. What are you talking about?
That's a gym he's talking about in Somerset for those of you guys who are coming in for the state show. That sounds like a stop easy to make.
That's it. Tyler will be there in his heels practicing. Feel free to come by.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll even sign autographs
Yes, he will.
or shoes.
We appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you, Jimmy,
Thanks
for
for
coming
coming,
on.
brother.
We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
This has been Bedson and Coffee Unfiltered. Thank you guys for listening.
Make sure to go follow us on social media.